4th. And we are going to shortly be getting to a bill, and I'm going to find the bill. That was H44.
141.
H41. Oh, sorry about that. And actually, Nate, well, I deal with one other quick thing. If we haven't already, have you given us hard copies of that one?
Oh, I can not believe that.
Okay, yeah, if you could print that out, but while you're printing that out, I sent out a memo this morning for the Budget Adjustment Act. And I could either take a straw poll or I can ask if anybody has objections.
We have a paper copy right here.
Yeah.
So I can give this
Paper copy. So if folks can maybe take a quick look at that, but essentially it is saying, okay, we agree with so this is Trevor Squirrel, who is our liaison, and he has the budget that we deal with, sent an email, which I forwarded on to everybody earlier this week. And it goes over, most of it is in the governor's recommendation. I looked through that and I don't have any problem with what the governor's recommending. This memo reflects that. There are two additional things that are being considered by the Appropriations Committee. One is removing the sunset on the marriage license fee that we put into place last biennium to support the domestic and sexual abuse fund. I don't know if that's right. I mean, yeah, well, essentially, but it also if increase the amount that goes to city clerks. There's a percent there, so that's what it removes the sunset. And then the other thing is that it creates a position in the Office of the Attorney General's office for the pre-charge diversion to get that up and running. Doesn't have any money attached to that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no money attached, but does that mean they already have enough money in the budget to fund it?
Correct.
Okay.
That's correct. Yeah, so there's no money, but there's the position needed to be. So, and you go into why the pre-charge diversion is important. I think from the testimony that we all heard the last couple of weeks, particularly from, I think, Chief Burke really focused on that. But then we also had the pre-charge diversion people in last Friday. So I think it's fair to say, it was fair what I put down here from the testimony that we heard. To just encourage the Appropriations Committee, to tell them why we think this position is important. So, any questions on the memo? And by the way, I'm a day late. I was supposed to get this to Minister. I apologize to everybody that I wasn't able to get to it. Yeah.
Very quick question. I'm good with it. I was just wondering, so the BAA is essentially our Brattleboro municipal government, it's called the unassigned general fund balance, where you basically overtax people and you've got money left over. And is that essentially
overtax or underspend?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, that's maybe
perspective on things, I guess.
yeah, and I didn't mean that I wasn't trying to be charged there, but just that you have more money left over than so the only thing in here that I was curious about is the not doing the sunset. So that doesn't really have to do with leftover money. But it's just also something that you can do.
Yeah, some things can be done in the Budget Adjustment Act. So this is Appropriations Committee.
Yes.
If they think that it's fine to go in there, who am I to argue on that? I mean, we can, so they do other technical type fixes.
Yeah.
As well as my understanding. So.
Yeah. Mark, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Just clarifying. So it appears in the very last paragraph that there is a funding request that's being made.
Almost certainly, there's going to be a funding request for the big bill, so-called big bill, and that is to actually. My understanding is that that is really for the grant money to go out to the CJCs or to the diversion programs that are out there. So that's my understanding of what. Yeah, we understand there's going to be an ask of 1.7 million or thereabouts from the Attorney General's office. I don't know if it's in the governor's budget or not. We will find that out next week. But I think that's.
But this in principle is endorsing that increase.
This in principle
Is endorsing that.
would
request.
endorse, yes, that would, yes. I think that this program frankly will not proceed without some funding. Now, where that funding comes from, if they take it from DOC and move it over to Attorney General's office, because a lot of this work was being funded by DOC, but we're changing the funding stream.
Right.
But, or is it going to be new money? I'm sure that it at least will be in part new money, because I think we're trying to expand that program. So, yeah, that it.
On the
I don't
surface, it
know.
looks like a new request.
You could be okay with this and absolutely vote against our request, out of this committee when it comes to the budget. They're not tied.
Okay.
They're not tied. You're not committing yourself whatsoever in that respect. But we want to also be, transparent, like, we want to be telling people, frankly, that there's going to be a financial request for this program. And I've been telling people since last year that it's a very wise investment, and we can continue. Well, additional testimony.
It's cheaper than.
It's cheaper than, it's less expensive than sending it through the criminal justice system. So, but we will have people in to tell us and talk to us more about that. You don't have to take that on faith. Angela.
I have a question that isn't related to something in this memo, but is about the BAA. So is this our chance to talk about the BAA? I just didn't know if we were going to be able to talk about the request by the Human Rights Commission.
So on the Human Rights Commission, there just hasn't been enough time to bring in people to testify. And I apologize that we couldn't fit that. There is a request coming from House General. It's really their primary jurisdiction. I suggest anybody who wants to back that can individually reach out and tell the Appropriations Committee that but I haven't had time to have that meeting
Okay,
part of the committee.
gotcha. Thanks.
Okay.
Are you asking for our opinions on this now, or what are you doing?
Yeah, I want to take a straw poll on whether to send this memo to the Appropriations Committee.
So I'll go along with it for now, but like you just said, I could very quickly change my
Yeah.
mind, and I probably will change my mind because I want to see decreases, not increases.
Understood?
And it's time to get the what I'm gonna say, the out of control spending that goes out of this building under control, I hope, in the next 2 years.
Right, no, I understand that. And I hope that we'll be able to show you that this will actually be a savings, because these are cases not going through the more expensive court system.
Well, yeah, and that's what I'm saying. This might be this, and that's why I'm going along with it instead of just a flat no right off the start. But I just want to set the tone right now
Fair enough.
for 2 years, if I make it, that I am sick of what it costs to live in this state for people that can't. Well, not.
Understood.
I'm just like.
Yeah, no, understood. Portability definitely.
Money is
a
wasted.
big issue. Yeah, no, I agree. So anyway. So I don't even know if I need a motion. I'll take a motion to approve the memo to send it to appropriations. Why not?
So move.
All right, I don't need a
I'll
second.
second.
Yeah, I don't need a second.
What?
So I actually don't need a second.
No, we don't.
Yeah, no, just to,
Do we want to continue that? Because we always have.
yeah, I think so.
Okay.
But
It's like a tradition.
yeah, it's a tradition. All right, so but we're not recording this anyways. I just need to know whether the committee supports it. So all those in favor of sending this, please raise your hand. And those opposed, all right. So we'll just send that off, and all right, that only took 5 minutes, and I'm only 24 hours behind on getting the memo. We are now going to move. So Ben, tell me your timing. Are you here till 10:30?
My next commitment, I believe, is at 11.
Okay, so in that case, I'm going to switch the order a little bit, and if we could start with Pam Martin Harris.
10:30.
Okay, all right. I apologize, Pam Martin Harris. We're going to start with a walkthrough where our legislative counsel explains the bill. And then we'll talk to you, and we'll talk more about the experiences that your families had and the need for this bill. So we're going to start with a kind of more of a technical walkthrough. Please join us, Ben.
Okay.
Could you send me a PDF of the? Yeah. Send me this.
going to share my screen and just, the bill's not very long, but typically is helpful, but if that's, satisfactory.
Sure,
Mr. Chair.
yeah, share the screen so that, folks can see, Ms. Harris.
Okay. So happy Friday, House Judiciary Committee, and not to bring down the mood, but we have H 41 before the committee, which is entitled an act relating to creating a felony penalty for abuse of a corpse. So very serious, morbid topic, unfortunately. And part of what I was going to say is, this was a part of the impetus for this bill, but I don't want to take the thunder from the witness. She has firsthand knowledge, so I will leave that to her. But essentially this bill, and for the record, Ben Novogratski from the Office of Legislative Counsel. So this bill proposes to create a new felony statute for an individual who abuses a corpse. It makes it a felony for an individual to transport or destroy a corpse without legal authorization, and creates an aggravated felony penalty for actions taken against a corpse to conceal a crime or otherwise avoid the consequences of the commission of a crime. So there's a standard penalty and then an aggravated enhancement, essentially. Now, before I get into the details of the bill, I should note that there is a statute on the books that covers some of these issues. It's in Title 18, Section 5211. But given the location of the statute itself in Title 18, which are the public health statutes, it's not really designed to get towards criminal behavior, even though it has a criminal penalty associated with it. And this is entitled an unauthorized burial or removal. So essentially deals with every time someone needs to be buried, there's a burial permit that's issued. And so it's about essentially moving or transporting a body without that permit in hand. So a little bit more of a public health, administrative consequence, for lack of a better term. But that being said, so the statute reads, a person who buries, entombs, transports, or removes the dead body of a person without that permit, or in any other manner or at any other time and place other than is specified in the permit, can be subject to a penalty of imprisonment of not more than 5 years, a fine of not more than $1,000, or both. So it's a pretty significant penalty. It is a felony penalty. However, and as you'll hear, it doesn't really cover the situation that this bill sort of emanated from. And so to go into the details of this bill, which is really designed about really more nefarious behavior, for lack of a better term. So you'll see in subsection A, so this creates a new statute, 13 VSA 2312, which is in the chapter or subchapter relating to homicide statutes. Because there is a little bit of a relation there. Most of the time when there's mutilation or abuse of a corpse, probably related to a murder. Not always, but it seemed like a good place for it to go organizationally. So subsection A reads that a person is guilty of abuse of a corpse if the person without legal authorization knowingly transports, buries, or otherwise hides a corpse, or burns, mutilates, disfigures, dismembers, or otherwise destroys the corpse. The penalty associated with that conduct is later on in C1 of creating a fine of imprisonment of not more than 5 years, or fine not more than $5,000, or both. So similar penalty to the Title 18 statute, however, with a higher fine associated with it. Now you might ask yourself, what does knowingly mean? Well, knowingly, there are various mental states in criminal law. You need two things. You need the mental intent and the physical act. So the act obviously is what's outlined here, transport, burial, or other sorts of mutilations, but you need to have that mental state too to be guilty of criminal culpability. So the mental state of knowingly is when you're aware of your actions and essentially know what you're doing. And I have actually more defined mental element, here. First walk through the year, I'm a little disorganized.
Work the kinks out.
Yeah, so to act knowingly means to engage in conduct that will cause or that will be practically certain to cause a specific harmful result. So you have to essentially know what you're doing is with the intent to do these things. Now you'll see for the enhanced felony, there's a higher mental state. So a person is, as you scroll down to page 2 in subsection B, starting on line 3, a person is guilty of aggravated abuse of the corpse if the person intentionally transports, buries, or otherwise hides a corpse to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction of a crime, burns, mutilates, disfigures, dismembers, or otherwise destroys a corpse to conceal a crime or avoid apprehension, prosecution, or conviction, or perpetrates or attempts to perpetrate sexual assault against a corpse. So you'll see that these are tied to that more nefarious behavior of concealment or sexual abuse. So that is why there's the aggravated felony associated with it and the elevated mental state. So what does intentionally mean? Intentionally means to act purposefully or with the specific conscious object of doing that thing. So you are specifically trying to hide a corpse, conceal a crime. That's the ultimate objective. So that's the elevation of mental states of the mental state between knowingly and purposely or intentionally. Purposely and intentionally are typically interchangeable. So, and with that, there's the aggravated penalty under C2 and there's a statutory minimum here that the person shall be imprisoned for not less than 5 and a maximum term of 10 and maybe fined not more than $10,000. Now, statutory minimums are rare in Vermont. However, reviewing our statutes, there's a statutory minimum in our maiming statute. And their maiming is a part of this conduct. And so the maiming statute, which is in Title 13, Section 2701, and I'll read it to you. So any person with the malicious intent, so again, you have this intent factor, that elevated mental state, to maim or disfigure, to cut out or maim a tongue, to put out or destroy an eye, cut out or tear off an ear, cut, slit, or mutilate the nose, lip, or cut or disable a limb. And any person privy to such intent, so anybody that's aware of it, who shall be present in aiding the commission of such an offense, shall be imprisoned for life or for not less than 7 years. So given that there's similarities in the conduct and in the mental state, and ultimately this is a policy decision for the committee, it's not unfounded that a statutory minimum would be appropriate in an instance like this. But I wanted to bring that up because it's so rare.
Yes, thank you.
Can you say how long ago we passed that maiming statute? I'm just wondering if.
1971.
Okay, because I know we've moved away as much as we can from the mandatory.
Right, but there are still a handful in those most serious crimes like maiming, homicide, and since this is
Right.
in that
yes.
vein,
But
and again, it's a policy decision. So if the committee votes no statutory minimum, that's your prerogative.
it's just helpful to hear, and you probably had said it and it hadn't sunk in, that when the ones that we currently have in statute were enacted, just, were they all mostly enacted back?
I don't have all
Yeah, no,
of
that's okay.
them
That's what.
handy, but
it's-
1971 for
But
the
if
maiming
you said
statute.
2014 or something, that would have been,
Right.
yeah, anyway, thank you.
Karen and then Angela.
You might have covered this already, but I appreciate how you started saying that there's something that addresses this already in Title 18.
Yes,
Of transporting a body without permit. And what the context, so it's not a crime if you did that?
it is.
Oh, it
It's
is.
a felony.
Okay,
It's just in Title 18, which are the public health statutes and there was a lot of conversation about, well, why is it there? It doesn't cover everything that might be appropriate in a situation like this or needed for the prosecution of such a crime. And so that's sort of what prompted the conversation to create one in Title 13.
Okay, so it's possible that somebody could be charged with both, with a violation of that and a violation of this, that,
As you'll hear from the witness, in her case, the person was not charged with
Okay.
that.
okay. Thanks.
So my question is actually sort of along those lines about charges. And so I would, I won't assume, I'll ask. It seems to me that this would be a charge that would be brought in addition to a murder charge.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering how that works practically, functionally, the purpose of the multiple charges. Is it working towards stiffer penalties? You know, like, I guess I'm wondering why we need this additional charge when the murder has happened and they'll be charged with murder. I'm not opposed to this, but I'm just wondering what the thinking is.
Well, I'll leave that to some of the other witnesses about why we might need something like that. But what I'm just going to say is that prosecutorial discretion. So given the circumstances of a case, sometimes maybe you're not successful on a murder charge, but you're successful on this one. So there are many reasons, but I'll leave it to my colleagues.
I'm just gonna follow up question again, and then it's Tom and Tom. There doesn't have to be a charge of murder for this. I mean, somebody, if they don't have evidence of a murder, but they have strong evidence that the person, that offender has done these actions, it may not be a murder.
Right.
So it can be very separate.
Came up on a course and like if it came into like, but yes, right.
If somebody does
May
these
not
things
have
for
been the
courts, whether
person-
they are the cause of that corpse or
Yes.
not,
Yes.
this applies. So I just wanted to clarify. So Tom and Tom.
I'm just curious, trying to make sure there's not some duplicity somewhere else with this, like in the compounding of felony or some sort of destruction or destruction of evidence that it might.
As far as like with the current statute?
Correct.
Right, so the concealment of the crime, that is new and exclusive to this statute. So there's no mention of that in the Title 18 statute.
Okay, well, but I was looking at like Title 13, and concealing felonies and stuff like that.
Not in relation to moving a body.
Okay.
So my thought process was when I brought this forward, that Ben kind of already touched on, was that if somebody's charged with murder, and they move or deface, the corpse, if they say they got off on the technicality on the murder, we would still have something to go after, and that was my thought process. I mean, I think you kind of touched on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's all fact dependent, but that's
Right.
one of the
That's pretty basic. But
one of the levels of discretion that a prosecutor would have. It's another tool for them to use. if you will.
So along those lines, say if somebody was charged with, and I think I know the answer, if somebody's charged with the murder, they aren't charged with this. And again, they get off on the technicality, could this still be brought as a charge?
Yeah, if the facts supported it.
Okay.
And it could be another person that wasn't involved with the murder that also perpetrated this aspect of the event.
Right, I thought that was the answer.
Mhm. And I should also say that my colleagues in Colorado did a 50-state survey of states that have laws like this on the books. Now, they all have some differences when it comes to penalties or mental states, but Vermont was one of two that didn't have one that covered all of these concepts on the books. Now, granted, there's the Title 18 statute, but it's a little different in its nature than what this is getting at.
So just quite sure you already stated it. This is just adding another tool to the toolbox if something gets more broke down.
Yeah, it's
More
another
accountability.
felony that could be charged if it's exploited. Right.
Thank you.
Ian and Karen.
How many of the other states were, they have a law like this on the book? Were they felonies?
It varies, but I mean, right, I would say it's kind of a 50-50 split. But as far as like some states I specifically looked at, so I know Oregon has a very similarly reading statute, and we have some similar statutes to Oregon that really mirrored the not more than 5 years, not more than 10 years language. I do know it's a misdemeanor in New Hampshire. In Maine, it's an intentionally mental state with up to 1 year in prison. Louisiana, there isn't the defined mental state, it's 3 years. So it's a little all over the place. Some are misdemeanors. And a misdemeanor in Vermont is anything that's 2 years or more of imprisonment. And so, but different states have a different classification. For instance, in New York, it's a year or more. So that's why I looked at Vermont statutes to see what the equivalent penalty was, since it was so varied across the country. So
Did you see any that had statutory minimums on an aggravated?
I can't recall right now, but if I do recall correctly, the statutory minimum language came from our own statutes and the equivalence between Maine and the conduct here.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Karen.
Yes, so, oh my goodness. So I feel like this is a topic like I don't really know a lot about of, handling corpses and such, so. But I'm realizing with this, how it says knowingly so I feel like you would know if you're transporting or burying a corpse, right? But then it is the piece of, mutilates, disfigures, dismembers, or destroy. I feel like that is clear, but I'm also, I don't know the right word, is it mortician? Of somebody who is preparing a body for, like, could do something that,
This wouldn't cover them.
this wouldn't cover that.
Right, because they would have legal authorization to prepare the body in whichever way the
Oh,
family.
okay, so it's on the first page.
Yeah, so it's
1718. Without legal authorization.
without legal authorization. So that's the key phrase in that.
Okay. Because that's what I just want to make sure, like, because I support, like, if somebody's doing harm to, like, do not want to have that happen. But if there are also folks that are working with corpse or body and something happens, don't want them to then be liable for now this felony.
They should be exempted from this. It's always, if you want to make that explicitly clear, specifically exempting them, that is language that you could work in. But again, they would presumably have legal authorization to do that work.
Okay.
And therefore would fall outside of the statute.
Okay. So I guess I'm just, if there's testimony that I just don't know who are the players that are in there, but if we can.
So medical examiners.
Yes.
Morticians, we'd have to figure out.
Like
We
med
need-
school.
Teaching
Medical school teacher, yeah, so. We'd need to find out, who would we look to find out,
Maybe a med school with.
well, no, it's it's legally authorized, does that? Is there med students and doing,
I'd have to look into that, but I am aware that releases are often signed. But I could look into whether or not
yeah, if that's sufficient language without legal authorization, or if we need to spell that out.
Wouldn't it be covered because they're not trying to get apprehension, prosecution, or conviction or something?
well, that would just be for the elevated
Yeah.
aggregative factor.
Okay, yeah.
So we
Um,
need a list of who is legally authorized in the state to interact
Handle
with
purposes.
and move and.
But of course, if they
mean-
wouldn't get removed from. the-
Right, and remember, there still is Title 18, which states, it doesn't say without legal authorization, it says without a permit. But the concept is kind of the same. The permit is your legal authorization to do it. So those people aren't currently being prosecuted. So I think it's a safe assumption, but just an assumption at this point, that there are those authorizations out there, but I'll work on getting some more concrete information for the committee.
Other questions for Ben? Yeah, Barbara.
I mean, this is a little bit tangential, but I was wondering if we do, I mean, I know that there are animal abuse cases. And I don't know if people, and of course, it's not as, I don't want to equate animals to a human, but I just wondered if somebody were, did something to somebody's animal, domestic or whatever, and was trying to cover that up by removing doing that to, right.
That's not covered here.
Right.
There are separate animal cruelty penalties.
So,
Yeah, so,
okay.
yeah. I know that Ben has to hopefully
Yes,
not
I'm
run
sorry,
too far.
Just a Senate judiciary.
Oh, well. You got 20 seconds.
That's right. I'll get my steps in.
Thank you.
All right, my pleasure, and I'll work on getting that info by the next hearing.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ben.
A pleasure.
Before we have you come on, Pam, I just want to say a couple things. I think it's pretty unique to Vermont, the way I ended up being the sponsor on this bill is that 10 or 12 years ago, some friends came to me with an issue they had with the state of Vermont and got a bill passed that held the state responsible in a situation, is all I'll say. And Patty Whitney, who contacted me, went to school with Pam, and then I went to school with Patty's husband. So anyway, they called me about this situation and asked me if I could do something about it. And I think it's really unique to Vermont because we're so small, and how somebody that went to high school with somebody in northern Vermont is now in Rutland. The case that's in Enosburg, it just kind of blows my mind how it all can come together. But I've had a couple conversations with Pam, and a few texts and a few emails, and it's just an incredible story, and really feel for the family and everything that you've been through. But I appreciate your courage for coming in here and telling your story, because it's not that long ago, and I'm sure it's still very raw. So, but anyway, and I wanted to mention that we talked about your mom's representative, Penny DeMar, and Penny is sitting in here, listening to the testimony, because he's very interested in it also, and is a co-sponsor on the bill.
So thank you, Pam, for being here, and if you go ahead and identify yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Okay, thank you. My name is Pam Martin Harris. A little bit about me. I grew up in Vermont, went to Harvard. Yes, I graduated with Patty, and in the 80s, I moved away. And now I'm in Florida. So I really appreciate you all having me here today. My mom is Roberta Martin, who was brutally murdered and whose body was set on fire, which is clearly abuse of a corpse. This all happened last July in Enosburg, Vermont. And I'd like to share a little bit about my mom, who at 82 years young, as we used to call her, she was truly, truly a healthy person. She walked daily. She did yoga. She gardened. She ate healthy. She just had this radiance about her. She really defined that 82 was the new 62. Mom had a sweetness about her. She was timid, a little old-fashioned. She kept to herself. She was well-liked by her friends and neighbors. She had a servant's heart. When family or friends were sick or needed help, she was there. She really had a heart of gold. My parents were married for 60 years. My dad passed 6 years ago. Mom then became a widow. on her own for the very first time in her life. This is when she began staying in the summers, spending her summers at her home in Enosburg, and spent the winter months with my husband and I in the South, getting out of the cold Vermont winters. She just wasn't ready to give up her independence and choose to stay home. She chose to stay in her home. She did not like being alone, especially at night. In fact, she'd leave every light on until it was bedtime, and we ended our evenings with a phone call to say our goodbyes. We spoke several times a day, every single day. In fact, last summer, we were talking about our plans this winter, planning on our Christmas vacation in Destin, Florida, spending time with my grandchildren that live nearby, baking as we always did during holidays. And I'm telling you this because our plans were shattered when she was murdered. That dreadful day to learn that a body was found and could possibly be my mom was so horrific. Detective Baker called me that day and asked what size shoe my mom wore. Did I know any particular details about her feet? At the time, I had no idea why such specific questions were being asked. My mom was petite. She wore a size 6 shoe, and she did have surgeries on each of her big toes where she had screws placed. I was puzzled and my mind was racing. Why am I being asked this? And because of those few facts, we were told that day by the Vermont State Police that the remains found were most likely my mom's, but they needed to be confirmed by the medical examiner. As you can imagine, those 24 hours for my family was horrible. We found out the next day, the body was identified later that it was my mom. My family and I did not learn all of the details that day. We got them in pieces, like a tiny broken puzzle that made no sense. We were told that a foot was found, that it had been severed, chewed off by an animal, dismembering it. Detective Nato found a human foot and then searched further, only to find a body 3 feet away that had been burnt beyond recognition and appeared to be human and not a decayed animal. Imagine being told this about a loved one, especially your mom. It was horrifying. And we still did not know who did this or why. I felt helpless. I felt completely broken. The horror that she must have felt was haunted. When the Vermont State Police arrested the suspect, forensics had determined she had been raped. They had proof of his DNA. My precious, sweet mom had been brutally attacked, murdered, raped, and carried out of her home, thrown into the woods, and set on fire. Let that sink in, if you will. A clear example of abuse of a corpse. My family and I were robbed of saying our final goodbyes to our mom. Imagine, if you will, losing a loved one from such a heinous crime, only to learn your loved one's body was burnt. It's cruel, it's inhumane, and it's so brutal. The closure you never get is unnerving. It's a void and an ache that's constant, an unrelenting battle with reality that you feel, the endless replay in your mind of what could have been, if only he would have left her body alone. But the cruel visions that replay in your head haunt you daily. I never got the opportunity to say my final goodbye to my precious mom. Mom was in the privacy of her home, sound asleep, in her safe place. This demonic monster broke in, harmed her, murdered her, raped her, but that wasn't enough. Instead of fleeing and leaving her, He carried her lifeless body out of her home less than a mile away. He could have just left her in the woods, but that wasn't enough. He then ignited her and burnt her beyond recognition in hopes to destroy any evidence, I would assume. Just let that resonate. Visualize that. It's very disturbing, as any of you could ever imagine. This is where me and my family were brought to, where the body was found 5 days later. There was a huge old oak tree that had fallen over, and its roots were pulled out of the ground, creating a ditch like. I crawled into that area and I lay there. As I lay there, I could smell the burnt wood and leaves that remained. My mom's remains lay there for the 5 days while we were searching for her, hoping to find her alive. My sweet mom was not only murdered, but her lifeless body was cruelly abused. Not only removing her body, but burnt it. It's cold-blooded, ruthless, unsympathetic, barbaric, vicious, atrocious, callous, evil, harsh, hateful, inhuman, inhumane, relentless, sadistic, spiteful, vicious, and wicked are just a few descriptions that come to mind. It is hard to express and put into words how this makes me feel. It's hard to choose the appropriate words to emphasize the brutality. I speak on behalf of my sisters, my mom's sisters, her sisters-in-laws, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, neighbors, friends, and even people that did not know her. We have all been in this nightmare together. It has caused so much pain for so many people. I have had to go to counseling, and I have learned several others have as well. This has tested my faith in questioning God. Why? Why would God allow this to happen? And in my faith, I have concluded that this was the act of the devil. When my mom's mother passed, she kissed her on the cheek, saying her final goodbyes. I was 10 years old at the time when my Grammy passed, and it's something I cherished. It's something I have done as well. When my own dad passed, I kissed him goodbye amongst other close family members when I was there. And it's something I've never really given any thought to until now. I never got to kiss my sweet mama. I never got to say my final goodbye. Almost 4 months later, after she was found, we finally heard from the medical examiner the cause of death was blunt trauma to the head, homicidal. This is what's written on my mom's death certificate forever. The date of death on my mom's death certificate says July 2024. There is no day of death because it cannot be proven the day she was murdered. This is permanent. It's what will be on record for generations to see. Not only did he rape and murder my mom, he burnt her. This could be why we don't have a date of death, which is just my theory. And as I've learned, if this passes, this could hold a penalty of up to 10 years. And I'm a little bit confused about the time scan here, but in my opinion, 10 years or up to 10 years or 5 years, whether it's aggravated, is just not enough, but that could be another conversation. When I first contacted anybody about this, I had spoken to Senator Brock, and he took an interest in it and said, I will have my counsel look at the history of this and how many cases there are. In my opinion, one case is too many. Last September, after a status conference, we met with Diane Wheeler, who is a deputy state's attorney in charge of my mom's case. And we were asking many questions. One was, why is only aggravated murder being charged against the accused and not each individual charge, which would have been breaking and entering, unlawful trespassing, assault, rape, murder, transferring a corpse, and abusing a corpse. She explained each charge and what each penalty hold, which I won't get into today. And Diane explained that it's merely a slap on a hand, a misdemeanor, as it is right now. And I'm not sure if that's clear. That's not clear to me. She suggested we reached out to our Vermont legislators. So this is when I reached out to Senator Randy Brock, Amy Farr, who is the Vermont State Police Victims Advocate, who put me in touch with Jen Pullman, who is the executive director of the Vermont Center for Crime Victim Services. And like Tom said, my friend Patty Whitney reached out to Tom Burdick, who now I've learned has been working on this bill. One of the reasons we're even addressing this bill today is because of my mom's murder. I would like for you to consider calling H41 Roberta's Law. My mom's legacy will live on by naming it Roberta's Law, hoping other families will not have to endure it as a misdemeanor, but enforcing this as a felony. The sad reality is she was taken from us. She was healthy, had a lot more living to do. God didn't take her, this monster did. But murdering her was not enough. He burnt her. No human deserves this, especially one's mom. And to sum up, in my mom's case, we may never know the order of assault the perpetrator did. Blunt trauma to the head, which the medical examiner concluded is the cause of death. He raped her, the DNA proves it, which would clearly be disturbing the corpse if he had raped her after he killed her. He removed her dead body from her home and set her on fire. Again, abuse of a corpse. If there is something that could arise during her trial, perhaps a technicality and the aggravated murder charge was thrown out, Diane would impose these individual charges. And it could be said that he reportedly, I feel like he should be reportedly charged twice if it was proven he raped her after he killed her and burned her. In today's society, with a combination of mental health and drug addiction, where it's become an epidemic and being such a problem, these crimes are just unthinkable. And we must put such important laws into place, and the penalty must be a felony. I am so grateful to Tom Burdick and his team and to all of you for considering this today. Thank you for hearing me, and God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pam. That was very powerful testimony. I really appreciate you being brave and sharing that with us.
This is very important to me.
Absolutely understood. Are there any questions for Ms. Harris? Yeah, go ahead, Tom.
Yeah, I don't have a question. I just the process a little bit, Pam, is that I'm gonna guess we're gonna take this up, and I hope we're gonna take this up in committee again. I'm certainly gonna push for it and try to get some justice for your mom. But the process is we'll come back at some point and during the session, and we'll talk about this again. We've got the Ledge Council that's going to get us some information. Maybe people in the committee will have some ideas to tweak the language a little bit and that type of thing. Okay. And again, my hope is that we pass it out of this committee. It'll then go to the House floor. It's a long, drawn out process, and your patience so far has been incredible. So we're going to ask for it to continue, I guess. And if it does get that part of the House floor and passes, then it will go to the Senate, and this will start all over again. Right. The same exact process in the Senate. So you may, I'm going to guess that if it does go that far, that you'll be asked to, or we will get you into the Senate Judiciary Committee one way or the other to unfortunately have to repeat your testimony. It's just the process, the way it works, but and I'm certainly going to be working to get it done. So, but thank you for your testimony. just incredible.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll start with the next witness.
Thank you.